Hello and welcome to the Collabs Experiment, where again I forgot to start Audacity to record a podcast. And here we go. Welcome to the Collapse Experiment, where I am still trying to figure all this stuff out. Yes. So, today's episode is actually just covering a few articles here and there. Not really any certain topics except for bad people running bad things. Yeah, conspirators for the Constitution. When anti-government speech becomes sedition. What the heck does that mean? I have no idea. But we're going to find out. This is an article by John and Nisha Whitehead via the Rutherford Institute. And let's be clear about one thing: seditious conspiracy isn't a real crime to anyone but the US government. Of course. Yeah, that's how that works. What do you mean you don't like us? How dare you? That's what that boils down to. To be convicted of seditious conspiracy, the charge levied against Stuart Rhodes, who was sentenced to 18 years in prison. He never even entered the Capitol building, and he looks spooky because he has an eye patch. Are you freaking serious? 18 years for being the driving force behind the J6 Capitol mostly peaceful protest. It wasn't even fiery, you fucks. Yeah, one doesn't have to engage in violence against the government, vandalize government property, or even trespass on property that the government has declared off limits to the general public. This is all true. This guy's got 18 years for not doing any of these things. To be convicted of seditious conspiracy, one need only foment a revolution, a poorly planned, unarmed revolution. Is that what their argument is? Are you effing serious? This is not whether Rhodes deserves such a hefty sentence. This is about the long term ramifications of empowering the government to wage war on individuals whose political ideas and expression challenge the government's power, reveal the government's corruption, expose the government's lies, and encourage the citizenry to push back against the government's many injustices. Huh. Isn't that what BLM was complaining about when they made $2 billion worth of damage across the country? Wasn't that what they were saying? Like, this is due to the injustice that the government waged on black folk for I'm not even gonna go to I they don't even have an answer for that. They don't even have an answer for how long that went on for, because they just make up dates and times. It's weird. This is about criminalizing political expression and thoughts, words, and deeds. This is about how the government has used the events of J6 to order to justify further power grabs and acquire more authoritarian emergency powers. This was never about so-called threats to democracy, that thing that they absolutely do not freaking respect. We're not a democracy, we're a constitutional republic. In fact, the history of this nation is populated by individuals whose rhetoric was aimed at fomenting civil unrest and revolution. Indeed, by the government's own definition, America's founders were seditious conspirators based on the heavily charged rhetoric they used to birth the nation. So isn't this just tradition? Like, aren't we fulfilling our nation's isn't this something that we're supposed to be doing? So yeah, there's this is quite the lengthy article. It's definitely interesting, and I want to see what it has to say, but I'm not wanting to spend the next 30-40 minutes reading this. So they do have some highlights in here. Let's go over some of those and see what they have to say. All of us are in danger. No duh. In recent years, the government has used the phrase domestic terrorists interchangeably with anti government extremists and terrorists to describe anyone who might fall somewhere on a very broad spectrum of viewpoints that could be considered dangerous. These people, if there's anything that we need the government to buy at this point, it's dictionaries, because they like to just make up definitions for words that they think are scary while not realizing that the word itself doesn't apply to whatever it is that they're trying to use it for. Get ready for the next phase of government's war on thought crimes and truth tellers, also known as conspiracy theorists. Yeah, I'm waiting for that. Although it's been going on anyways. Look at Twitter, Facebook. Facebook. I hate Facebook. In other words, if you dare to subscribe to any views that are contrary to the government's, you may well be suspected of being a DT and treated accordingly. How is that accordingly? Is that going to Gitmo? Waterboarding? I don't know. Solitary confinement seems to be like one of their popular things. In other words, you might already be flagged as potentially anti-government or in a government database somewhere. No shit. Maine Corps, for example, that identifies and tracks individuals who aren't inclined to march in lockstep with police states dictates. Oh, let's see a little bit more about what is this Maine Corps. As The Intercept reported, the FBI, CIA, NSA, and other government agencies have increasingly invested in corporate surveillance technologies that can mine constitutionally protected speech on social media platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram in order to identify potential extremists and predict who might engage in future acts of anti government behavior. Well, and we're just calling you a bunch of bag of dicks because you're acting like a bag of dicks. Well, is that anti government behavior, or are we just calling you out on your bullshit? Stop being a bag of dicks. It's not hard. I mean, unless you're taking blue pills. In true Orwellian fashion, the government would have us believe that it is Assange and Manning who are the real criminals for daring to expose the war machine's seedy underbelly. Yeah, Trump, my biggest beef with Trump right now is that he did not pardon Assange, Manning, Snowden. There's the list of people who, like, we're supposed to have these laws to protect whistleblowers, and I will say Tim Pool, not only is he ass backwards when it comes to who he likes and why, because he clearly doesn't understand the stories between Snowden and Assange. He got them backwards. He tried to say that Assange was a journalist who vetted his articles before posting them on Wikipedia, which is wrong. Assange is a publisher. He's not a journalist. Meanwhile, Snowden, yeah, he collected a bunch of different documents, but he handed them over to reporters to be vetted to make sure that the information wouldn't endanger anybody. That was where that kind of pissed me off when this guy who claims to be a journalist got that all mixed up. That really bugged me. And yeah, so this is how the police state deals with those who challenge its chokehold on power. Yeah, this isn't merely about whether whistleblowers and journalists are part of a protected class under the Constitution. It's a debate over how long we, the people, will remain a protected class under the Constitution. We're not, okay? We're not. And I understand that is the point of this article here, is that they're trying to get you to think about, like, oh, I guess it doesn't apply to us anymore. Well, if that doesn't apply to us, who does the Constitution apply to? Oh, absolutely freaking no one. Why are these people in power? That's a question I keep asking myself. We'll all be seditious conspirators in the eyes of the government. Eventually, as I point out in my book, okay, so they're promoting a book here, but at least it's at the end of the article. Battlefield America, the War on the American People, and its fictional counterpart, the Eric Blair Diaries. I don't know about that one. I'm going to have to check that out later. But anytime there's diaries involved, it's usually associated with like the Turner diaries. Yeah, we will do better to be conspirators for the Constitution starting right now. Let's see. Yeah, okay. So I understand like where they're coming from and what they're trying to say. Like, if you're going to be a conspirator, at least follow the Constitution, which is hilarious because, as I pointed out before, the Wolverine Watchmen, one of them loves the founding fathers, loves the Constitution. And when he was allowed to make a final statement to the court before being sentenced, his lawyer said, "Don't bring up the Constitution because it'll prove to everyone that you're an extremist." You mean the same Constitution that gives the court the authority to throw him in prison? That Constitution? If you're following the Constitution, you're an extremist. Well, if that's the case, then the judge is the extremist. The lawyers involved are extremists because they're following the Constitution by running the court. It doesn't make any sense. Like, really. I got into an argument with a guy recently about what happened with George Floyd. And I said that it wasn't the cop that was on trial, it was the state, and the state was putting itself on trial, and that there is no winning. Like, if the cop is found guilty, the state is guilty because the cop was following the laws of the state, and the cop was trained by the state on how to do his job, which he did. He did exactly what the state ordered him to do according to his training. So if the cop is found guilty, well, then the state is guilty. If the cop is found innocent, yeah, then it's what, justifiable homicide by the state? Like, there's all kinds of questions that could be raised there, but the fact that the cop was found guilty means that the state itself was guilty for killing him. You dumb idiots. That's what that meant. It's not the cop that should be in prison. It's the people who are responsible for putting the cop in that situation and George Floyd being dead, which is hilarious because he's the one that took the drugs himself. But anyways, there's one other article I wanted to cover here. Well, maybe two, because I kind of like this one too. British police detain journalist Kit Clarenberg, interrogate him about the gray zone. Not sure what the gray zone is, but we will find out. British counter-terror police detained journalist upon his arrival at London's Luton Airport and subjected him to an extended interrogation about his political views and reporting for the gray zone, which I was not even familiar with the gray zone until I saw this article pop up. As soon as journalist Kit Clarenberg landed in his home country of Britain, May 17th, 2023, 6 anonymous plainclothes counter-terror officers detained him. I'm sorry, but if you're not in a uniform, I'm not going anywhere with you. That would be my policy. Yeah, you don't look official. How the bleep do I know you are who you say you are, aside from you're just acting like a dickhead? They quickly escorted him to a back room. Again, not going to happen. No. Get somebody in a uniform, somebody of authority. I don't know who the F you are. Where they grilled him over 5 hours about his reporting for this outlet. They also inquired about his personal opinion on everything from the current British political leadership to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. How dare you be against the war that we want? At one point, Clarenberg's interrogators demanded to know whether the Gray Zone had a special arrangement with Russia's Federal Security Bureau to publish hacked material. Why is it the government doesn't know how to secure their information online? It's a simple question. Like, shouldn't they be the ones on top of how to make sure that this information is secure? During Clarenberg's detention, police seized the journalist's electronic devices and SD cards, fingerprinted him, took DNA swabs. No, thank you. and photographed him intensively. They threatened to arrest him if he did not comply. Arrest me, bitch. Clarenberg's interrogation appears to be London's way of retaliating for the journalist blockbuster reports exposing major British and U.S. intelligence intrigues. In the past year alone, Clarenberg revealed how a cabal of Tory national security headliners violated the Official Secrets Acts to exploit Brexit and install Boris Johnson as prime minister. In October 2022, he earned international headlines with his expose of British plans to explode the Kerch Bridge connecting Crimea to the Russian Federation. Then came his report on the CIA's recruitment of two 9/11 hijackers this April, a viral sensation that generated massive social media attention. Let me read that one again because I don't I mean, I'm pretty sure I already knew some of this, but let's see what he has to say again. Then came his report on the CIA's recruitment of two 9/11 hijackers this April, a viral sensation that generated massive social media attention. There's a lot coming out about 9/11 now. It's been what, 20 plus years, and all of a sudden we're learning a little bit more here and there that Inside Job is pretty darn accurate. Among Clarenberg's most consequential exposés was his June 2022 report unmasking British journalist Paul Mason as a UK security state collaborator, hell-bent on destroying the Grey Zone and other media outlets, academics, and activists critical of NATO's role in Ukraine. Holy shit, I am going to have to start following this guy on Twitter. This might be our new Michael Hastings here, and I don't want to see anything bad happen to this guy. So let it be said, the more exposure this guy and his stories gets, the less likely it is that they would do something to him. So yeah, not feeling good about this. The Brits tend to be a bunch of dicks. That's why we kicked them out of being our governmental body a long time ago. So yeah, kind of feeling it for this guy here. It seems like he's trying to do a good job, and they really don't like him doing a good job. So yeah. I've been expecting something like this since a police interview request arrived last summer, Clarenberg told the Grey Zone, referring to a communique he received from a senior British detective. The email requested Clarenberg report to a station to be questioned about allegations by an unnamed complainant of offenses under the Computer Misuse Act. Unnamed complainant. Translation: the police. They're complaining. And that's the story there. They don't like what he's doing, so they're gonna say somebody else is complaining. No, it's them. Like, if they're not willing to name who the complainant is, well then it's them, right? So yeah. We've got this journalist here that is being interrogated extensively for doing his job. Weird. And the last one I want to get to, considering my last video, 3 years later, no justice for BLM insurrection in DC. Huh. Going back to Tim Pool again, he likes bringing this one up, and I do have to agree with him on this one. DC's lead prosecutor has turned a blind eye to a 6-month campaign of terror in the nation's capital in 2020. 6 months. So if J6, like if it just wasn't one day, if it went on for 6 months, then it'd be fine. If they just scream the right thing, it'd be fine. Is that what we're being told here? Don't just do it for one day. They'll arrest you. Do it for 6 months. That's okay. Let's see here. so he could keep his eyes on the most nonviolent protesters of J6 2021. Okay. Our office prosecutes all kinds of violence regardless of political motivation. The same. Liar! So said U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Matthew Graves. Sir, you need to remove that name because you are not a gift from God, and you're soiling that name as a fellow Matthew. Uh, you're denounced. You're a Tim or a Bob. Bob Graves. That's how I'm referring to you now. You ass munch. Under oath, mind you, with a straight face during a hearing of the House Oversight Committee earlier this month. So he said this bullshit under oath. Our office prosecutes all kinds of violence, regardless of political motivation, the same. No, you don't. You lying piece of shit. Could somebody please walk him into his cell? What is this garbage? Representative Paul Gozer questioned Graves' disparate treatment of BLM rioters who terrorized Washington, D.C. in 2020 versus Trump supporters involved in the events of J6. Although the start of both incidents were a mere 7 months apart, they're a world away in terms of accountability. Didn't one of these groups set the chapel on fire? Oh, no. The cathedral, St. John's Cathedral. Isn't that what happened? And it wasn't the Trump supporters. There's also the guardhouse outside of the White House that was set on fire. Yeah. Although the start of, let's see here. In what Graves calls the Capitol siege investigation, more than 1,000 Trump supporters have been criminally charged. Really? Graves, a Biden appointee, has promised to double that caseload before he's finished. You can't promise to do something if there isn't something there to do. So you're going to find 2,000 people who apparently did something wrong on J6. What if there's only 500? What if there really was only 500 and you now have 1,000? So you got 500 political prisoners just because you want a certain number? That's what we're looking at here. His office announces new arrests every week. That, however, is not the case for rioters who caused far more violence and inflicted far more damage in the nation's capital in 2020. The rioting that began on May 29th, 2020, at Lafayette Square prompted the lockdown of the White House. Donald Trump, his wife, and teenage son were ushered into an underground bunker for their safety as looters and arsonists repeatedly tried to scale the fence and break through police barricades erected outside the White House. But that's okay. And what started that night in 2020 didn't just last a few hours. It was the case with the Capitol as was the case with the Capitol protest. On June 1st, rioters burned part of St. John's Church, an historical landmark across from the White House, and set ablaze other areas of the public park. I don't remember that happening on J6. I don't. Chaos continued throughout the summer with the president, his family, and White House staff under constant threat. Police arrested 11 people in Lafayette Square in July 2020 for various offenses, including assaulting a police officer. That Tuesday night, incidents that stretched over hours are the latest confrontations to transpire near the White House, where protesters have been gathered daily for more than a month to protest for racial justice after the killing of George Floyd in the custody of Minneapolis police. Minneapolis, not DC. The Washington Post reported July 8th, 2020. After Trump accepted the GOP nomination for president on the White House grounds, August 2020, rioters chased Republican lawmakers, including Senator Rand Paul and his wife, leaving the event. Some assaulted police in an attempt to get near members of Congress. Representative Brian Mast of Florida, who lost both legs and a finger in Afghanistan, was surrounded and shouted down by BLM protesters as they tried to get home. A paraplegic with a missing finger was being yelled at by protesters because you're so brave. Elected officials weren't the only targets of rage filled activists occupying the heart of the nation's capital that year. Trump supporters, including young families with children, were attacked by BLM and Antifa rioters during pro Trump rallies in November and December of 2020. I remember that. Dozens of people were arrested, including a man who jumped over two barricades in an attempt to enter the White House. Not only has Graves not charged any suspects involved in the 2020 riots under his watch, but his office has also helped negotiate a settlement between the Justice Department and Lafayette Square rioters who sued the government for violating their civil rights during what Graves called racial justice demonstrations in Lafayette Square. So when did J6 protesters get to sue the government for their civil rights being violated? That's a fair question because they're setting that precedent right now. They're protesting. It was mostly peaceful, not even fiery, no arson. The only person shot and killed was one of the protesters by a Capitol police officer. Yeah, when do they get to sue? Also help negotiate a settlement. You're a bitch. Graves, you are a bitch. So yeah, the settlement with BLM, DC required Park Police and Secret Service to update the policies to protect those who peacefully exercise their First Amendment rights. Fuck you. Unbelievable. So it only applies to a certain political faction. That's where we're at. The Constitution does not apply to all people. Amazing. First Amendment rights these days are in the eye of the beholder, or in this case, the lead government prosecutor who decided to turn a blind eye to a 6-month campaign of terror in the nation's capital in 2020 so he could keep his sights on people who participated in a mostly nonviolent, comparatively brief protest on J6. Clearly, all sieges are not created equal. So yeah, that's where I'm ending this one today because I might just start breaking stuff if I read any more. So anyways, that's about it. It's Friday. I got stuff to do, and yeah, it's been pretty busy the last couple weeks, and I'm tired. So anyways, keep on typing.